My fiancé announced, "I'm not signing a prenup. You either trust me or it's over." I said, "You're right." Then I canceled the wedding that night. 72 hours later, she was on social media begging me back. I, 32M, thought I had found my person. After 3 years together, I proposed to my fiancée last December, and she said yes with tears in her eyes. We set the wedding date for this past weekend, August 14th. Everything seemed perfect until 2 weeks ago when I brought up the prenup. I'm not wealthy by most standards, but I do well. I own a small tech consulting firm that I built from scratch over the past 8 years. Plus, I inherited my grandfather's house and a modest investment portfolio. My lawyer advised getting a prenup, especially since my business was growing rapidly. I figured it was just a formality, protection for both of us. That's when everything unraveled. When I mentioned scheduling a meeting with lawyers to draft the prenup, her entire demeanor changed. She went cold, telling me she couldn't believe I didn't trust her. I tried explaining it wasn't about trust, but about protecting what we'd each built before we met. She wasn't hearing it. For 2 weeks, she gave me the silent treatment whenever the topic came up. She'd change the subject or leave the room. I started getting anxious about the wedding being so close with this hanging over us. 3 nights ago, I finally cornered her about it. I told her we needed to resolve this before the wedding. That's when she dropped the bomb. She looked me dead in the eye and said she wasn't signing a prenup. Period. She told me I either trusted her completely or it was over. No middle ground. No discussion. Sign or leave. Something in her tone set off every alarm bell in my head. This wasn't the woman I fell in love with. The woman I proposed to would never have given me an ultimatum like that. She would have at least been willing to discuss it. I stared at her for a long moment, then told her she was absolutely right. Either I trusted her or I didn't. And in that moment, I realized I didn't trust someone who would threaten to end our relationship over a legal document designed to protect us both. I told her the wedding was off. She laughed at first, thinking I was bluffing. When she realized I was serious, she started backtracking, saying we could talk about it after the wedding. But it was too late. Something fundamental had shifted in how I saw her. That night, I started making calls. I contacted the venue first. Surprisingly, they were understanding and only charged me a 30% cancellation fee, since I was giving them 72 hours notice instead of the required week. The caterer was less forgiving but agreed to a 50% charge. The photographer was actually relieved. Apparently, she had another couple wanting that date and offered to shoot their engagement photos for free as thanks. I called my groomsman next. My best man was shocked but supportive. He offered to help with anything I needed. The other guys were confused but said they'd support whatever decision I made. Then came the hard part, calling family. My parents were devastated but said they trusted my judgment. My mom cried, which broke my heart. She'd grown to love my fiancée like a daughter. My dad was quieter but told me he was proud of me for standing up for myself. Her family was a different story. Her mother called me screaming, accusing me of being controlling and manipulative. She said I was breaking her daughter's heart over money. Her father was more measured but still angry, telling me I was making a huge mistake. Meanwhile, my fiancée had apparently told everyone I'd called off the wedding because she wouldn't sign away her rights to my money. She painted me as this greedy, controlling person who didn't love her enough to trust her. The narrative she was spinning made me look like the villain. But here's what she didn't know, and what I discovered that night while canceling everything. When I called our wedding planner to cancel, she mentioned something odd. Apparently, my fiancé had called her 2 weeks ago asking about changing some of the vendors last minute. Specifically, she wanted to add a videographer for social media content and had asked about upgrading several services. When the planner told her the costs and that I'd need to approve the changes, my fiancé got angry and said she'd handle it herself. This struck me as weird because she'd never mentioned wanting a videographer, and we'd agreed on our budget months ago. I decided to do some digging. I logged into our joint account that we'd opened for wedding expenses. What I found made my blood run cold. Over the past month, there had been several large withdrawals I didn't recognize. When I cross-referenced them with dates, they coincided with times she said she was working late or out with friends. I called the bank the next morning and requested detailed statements. The withdrawals were all cash, made from ATMs across town. But what really caught my attention was the pattern. They were always on Thursdays, always the same amount, always from the same area of the city. I knew she didn't work in that area, and she'd never mentioned having friends there. That afternoon, I did something I'm not proud of. I drove to that area and waited near the ATM she'd been using. I felt like a creep, but I needed answers. I didn't have to wait long. Around 4 p.m., I saw her car pull up. But she wasn't alone. A man I didn't recognize got out of the passenger seat and waited while she went to the ATM. They were clearly comfortable with each other, too comfortable. When she came back, he put his arm around her waist and they walked into a coffee shop together. I sat in my car, feeling like I was going to throw up. I didn't confront them. Instead, I went home and did more investigating. I checked our cell phone records, something I'd never done before because I trusted her. The number of texts and calls to an unknown number over the past 3 months was staggering. Sometimes they'd text back and forth for hours, especially when she claimed to be working late. I reverse searched the number. It belonged to someone named Marcus, and his social media profiles painted a picture of a guy who clearly had money. Expensive car, designer clothes, frequent travel. His recent posts showed him at several restaurants I recognized, places she'd claimed to be going with her girlfriends. The pieces were falling into place, and I felt sick. But I didn't confront her that night. Instead, I waited. I wanted to see how this would play out. She came home around 7 p.m., acting completely normal. She asked about my day, made dinner, and we watched a movie like nothing had happened. She even brought up the wedding, asking if we could talk about the prenup situation. She seemed ready to compromise, but it was all an act. I could see it now, the way she kept checking her phone, the way she seemed distracted during conversations, the way she'd changed her password on her laptop a few weeks ago for security. I told her I needed more time to think about everything. The next day was Thursday. I called in sick to work and followed her again. This time, I was prepared. I brought a camera with a zoom lens, nothing illegal, just documenting what was happening in public spaces. She went through the same routine. ATM, then coffee with Marcus. But this time, they went back to what appeared to be his apartment. She stayed for 3 hours. When she came home that evening, she was in an amazing mood. She apologized for the prenup fight, said she'd been thinking about it, and realized she was being unreasonable. She suggested we could work something out after the honeymoon. She was affectionate, attentive, everything I'd been missing for weeks. It was all fake. That night, after she fell asleep, I transferred the wedding fund money back to my personal account. All of it. If she wanted to keep seeing Marcus on my dime, that was ending now. Friday morning, she left for work as usual. I spent the day consulting with a lawyer about my options. He was impressed with the documentation I'd gathered and suggested I might want to consider a private investigator to build a stronger case, though for what purpose, I wasn't sure yet. Friday evening was when everything exploded. She came home and immediately went to check her phone, which she'd been doing every day at exactly this time. But something was wrong. She got a confused look on her face and started frantically typing. Then she got a call. I could only hear her side of the conversation, but it was clear Marcus was not happy about something. She kept apologizing and saying she'd figure it out. When she hung up, she looked panicked. That's when she tried to access our joint account. I was in my home office when I heard her scream from the kitchen. She came storming in, demanding to know what happened to the money. I calmly told her I'd moved it back to my account since the wedding was canceled. She completely lost it. Started yelling about how that was her money too, how she'd contributed to wedding expenses. I pulled out the bank statements and showed her exactly what she'd contributed versus what she'd withdrawn. Her face went white. Then I showed her the photos. I didn't say anything at first, just laid them out on my desk. Pictures of her and Marcus at the ATM, at the coffee shop, going into his building. Her reaction told me everything I needed to know. She tried to explain it away, saying Marcus was just a friend, that I was being paranoid and controlling. But when I showed her the phone records, she finally broke down. She admitted to the affair but claimed it had only been emotional until recently. She said she'd been confused about our relationship, that my prenup demand had made her realize she needed to explore her feelings. She begged me to forgive her, promising to end it with Marcus. I listened to everything she had to say. Then I told her to pack her things and leave. She spent the weekend at her sister's place, calling and texting constantly. She promised she'd choose me, that she'd do anything to make it work. But I was done. Update 1. The real drama started Monday morning. I woke up to dozens of notifications on my phone. She'd posted a long, emotional message on social media about how I'd abandoned her 3 days before our wedding because she wouldn't sign away her rights to my assets. She painted herself as the victim of a controlling, money-obsessed fiancé who couldn't trust her love. The post had hundreds of comments, mostly from people I didn't know supporting her and calling me terrible names. Her friends and family were sharing it, adding their own commentary about what a mistake I was making. But what really got to me were the comments from my own friends and family who didn't know the whole story. Some of them were actually defending her, saying I was being unreasonable. I decided it was time to set the record straight. I didn't want to air our dirty laundry publicly, but I also wasn't going to let her control the narrative. I posted a simple response. I thanked everyone for their concern, but asked for privacy during this difficult time. I mentioned that there were aspects of the situation that I couldn't discuss publicly, but that my decision was based on more than just the prenup disagreement. I also privately reached out to close friends and family, sharing the evidence of her affair. I wasn't trying to destroy her reputation, but I needed the people who mattered to me to understand why I'd made this choice. The response was swift and decisive. My best man, who had been somewhat sympathetic to her posts, called me immediately after seeing the photos. He was furious, not at me, but at her for making me look like the bad guy when she was the one cheating. My parents were heartbroken but supportive. My mother actually cried again, but this time out of relief that I'd discovered the truth before the wedding rather than after. Word spread quickly through our social circles. By Tuesday, several people had reached out to tell me they'd suspected something was off about her recent behavior but hadn't wanted to say anything. Her coworker mentioned that she'd been taking a lot of long lunches and personal calls at work. A mutual friend said she'd seen her with an unknown man at a restaurant a few weeks ago, but assumed it was work-related. Meanwhile, her social media posts were becoming more desperate. She deleted the original post after too many people started asking uncomfortable questions, but she kept posting vague messages about heartbreak and betrayal, ironically, positioning herself as the one who'd been betrayed. Update 2. Wednesday brought the biggest surprise of all. Marcus called me. I almost didn't answer the unknown number, but something made me pick up. He introduced himself and asked if we could meet for coffee. He said there were things I needed to know about my ex-fiancée. Against my better judgment, I agreed to meet him that evening. Marcus turned out to be different than I'd expected. He was well-dressed and articulate, but he seemed genuinely remorseful. He told me he hadn't known about me until recently. According to Marcus, she'd told him she was single when they met 3 months ago. She'd been pursuing him aggressively, and he'd been attracted to her confidence and independence. She'd mentioned having an ex-boyfriend who was obsessed with her and wouldn't leave her alone, but claimed they'd broken up months ago. It wasn't until last week that he'd started piecing together the truth. She'd been asking him for money, small amounts at first, claiming her ex was freezing her accounts out of spite. When he'd offered to help her get her own place, she'd made excuses about why she couldn't move yet. Then, this past Thursday, she'd shown up at his apartment in tears, saying her ex had found out about them and was threatening to ruin her life. She'd asked him for a large sum of money to help her start fresh somewhere else. That's when Marcus had done his own investigating. He'd found her social media profiles, which were still full of pictures of us together, including engagement photos from just a few months ago. He'd realized she'd been lying about everything. When he confronted her Friday, she'd admitted the truth but begged him not to leave her. She'd promised to end things with me and said we could be together once she got through the messy breakup. She'd asked him to be patient and keep supporting her financially until she could sort things out. Marcus had been disgusted. He'd told her it was over and that he was going to tell me the truth. That's when she'd panicked and started her social media campaign, trying to control the story before he could reach me. I thanked Marcus for his honesty. He seemed like a decent guy who'd been manipulated just as much as I had. He also mentioned that she'd taken several expensive items from his apartment over the weeks they'd been together: jewelry, electronics, cash. He was considering filing a police report. As I drove home from that meeting, I felt a strange sense of closure. The woman I'd loved and planned to marry had been systematically deceiving both of us, manipulating our emotions and our finances for her own benefit. Update 3. The past few days have been a whirlwind. My ex-fiancée apparently found out about my meeting with Marcus and completely lost it. She showed up at my house Thursday night, screaming and pounding on my door. When I didn't answer, she started calling and texting nonstop. Her messages ranged from apologetic to angry to desperate. She claimed she'd made a mistake, that she really loved me and had just been confused. She promised to cut off all contact with Marcus and anyone else. She said she'd sign any prenup I wanted and give up any claim to my assets. She begged me to give her another chance. When I didn't respond, the messages became more erratic. She accused me of ruining her life, said I was cruel and vindictive. She claimed I'd manipulated Marcus into lying about their relationship. She threatened to take legal action against me for emotional distress. Finally, I blocked her on everything and told her through a mutual friend that any further contact should go through lawyers. That's when she made her final play. Yesterday morning, she posted a series of social media messages that were clearly designed to make me look abusive. She claimed I'd been controlling and manipulative throughout our relationship, that I'd isolated her from friends and monitored her activities. She said the prenup was just the latest way I'd tried to control her, and that when she'd finally stood up for herself, I'd retaliated by spreading lies about her. It was a masterful piece of manipulation designed to flip the script and make her the victim again. And for a few hours, it worked. Several people reached out to me with concern, asking if the allegations were true. But she'd made a critical error. In her desperation to paint me as controlling, she'd claimed that I'd been monitoring her phone and following her around for months. She described the photos I'd taken as evidence of stalking behavior rather than her cheating. What she didn't realize was that by acknowledging the photos were real, she was admitting to the affair. And several of her friends who'd been defending her on social media started asking uncomfortable questions about the timeline and details. The whole narrative began falling apart when people started comparing her different versions of events. Marcus, fed up with being dragged into her drama, posted his own statement clarifying the timeline and his involvement. He included screenshots of some of their conversations that clearly showed she'd been lying about her relationship status. By evening, most of her supportive comments had disappeared. People started calling her out directly, and she eventually deleted all the posts. This morning, I woke up to a voicemail from her. She was crying, begging me to stop the harassment campaign against her. She said people were being cruel to her on social media and that she just wanted it all to stop. She asked if we could meet in person to work things out like adults. I haven't responded. I've said everything I need to say. Final update. It's been a week since the wedding was supposed to happen, and I'm writing this from my grandfather's house, where I've been spending some time to clear my head. My ex-fiancée has gone quiet on social media, though I hear through mutual friends that she's been reaching out to people individually, trying to rebuild bridges and control the damage to her reputation. Some people are willing to forgive and forget, but many aren't. The truth has a way of getting around in small social circles. Marcus filed that police report he'd mentioned. Apparently, the items she'd taken from his place were worth several $1,000s. I don't know what will come of it, but I'm glad he's holding her accountable. I've been doing a lot of thinking about how I missed the signs. Looking back, there were red flags I ignored because I was in love. She'd been evasive about her past relationships, claiming all her exes were crazy or controlling. She'd been oddly interested in my finances from early in our relationship, asking detailed questions about my business and inheritance. She'd pushed for us to move in together quickly and had suggested combining finances much earlier than I was comfortable with. The prenup wasn't what ended our relationship, it was what revealed who she really was. When faced with legal protection that would have prevented her from benefiting financially from our marriage, she showed her true colors. The ultimatum, the affair, the manipulation, it was all there beneath the surface. I dodged a bullet. If we'd gotten married without a prenup, who knows how much it would have cost me in a divorce when I inevitably discovered her cheating. If we'd gotten married with a prenup, she probably would have found other ways to manipulate and deceive me. Instead, I learned who she was for the price of some canceled vendor fees and a lot of emotional pain. I'm not bitter, though I was for a while. I'm actually grateful. Better to find out now than after years of marriage and possibly children. Better to lose some money on a canceled wedding than half my assets in a divorce. My business is thriving, I have my health, and I have family and friends who stood by me when things got ugly. Most importantly, I have my self-respect and my freedom. The house feels peaceful now. I'm in no rush to date again, but I'm not closed off to the possibility either. When I do meet someone new, I'll be more careful, more aware of red flags, and yes, more insistent on protecting myself legally. Sometimes the best thing someone can do is show you exactly who they are. My ex-fiancée gave me that gift, even if she didn't mean to. The wedding would have been beautiful, but the marriage would have been a disaster. I'm grateful I learned the difference before it was too late. 3 years of my life weren't wasted. They were an education. And now I'm ready for whatever comes next.